listening to episode 333 of Mitolife Radio. I'm Matt Blackburn. Really excited to announce the release of the new Mitolife EZ Flow water structuring filter. This is a drinking water filter, not a whole house or a shower filter. It's meant to go under your kitchen sink. That is the most practical place to put it. When I started studying human health back in 2010, I immediately became interested in water and all of the things that are trending now in the natural health community, the light, water, magnetism stuff, basically the grounding, the sunlight or the artificial light therapy, the drinking water quality, the bathing water quality. I immediately noticed that those three things should be prioritized over nutrition and diets, because I saw the raw vegan diet, which I did, the regular vegan diet, the vegetarian diet, and then keto, carnivore, all of these different schools of thought. And back at the very beginning, I identified the light, water, magnetism stuff to move the needle the most, to be the easiest things for people to do. A lot of it was free. But so I thought with water. It turns out that water is not free in our current world. And a lot of people won't swallow that pill. And those are the spring water people that believe that water coming out of the earth is superior to everything else. I've never seen anyone prove that they're drinking primary water, which is new water that's being created inside of the earth that's never touched Industrial Revolution products. I've never seen proof of that. So until I see that, I'm not going to believe it. And even going to find a spring or a high quality well, I did that in the beginning. I would drive long hours. At one point, I considered driving once a month up to Yosemite, all the way from San Diego. I was really out of my mind at that point to fill up a sedan full of glass carboys. I never pulled the trigger on that, but I was really close to doing that insane trek once a month just to get drinking water. I'm just giving a little background of my history of how I got into studying water, because I'm not a new duck. I'm not just into this a couple of years like a lot of people on social media. I've been studying water since 2010 quite intensely. So for a few years, I was driving around, picking up different special well water and different spring waters. A lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of broken glass in that endeavor. And at one point, I realized that it wasn't practical, especially working multiple jobs. So I started to pick up filtered water from a water filtration store. And there was one, I think that's still around down in West Point Loma, San Diego, right around where I was born. And the filter was the size of a room, essentially. It was a giant filter that you could see when you walked into the store. And so I started filling up 30 gallons there, lugging it to my apartment. Eventually, my roommates started drinking it. After that, I started experimenting. Once I had a little bit of money, not much, but a little bit, I started to buy the Mega Home water distiller. I bought the Aquanui water distiller. I bought different reverse osmosis filters. And I started to experiment with all these different filtration systems, but I never went the alkaline water multi-level marketing scheme path because I knew that that was garbage. And after experimenting with different units, I came across a combination of not only reverse osmosis, but RO combined with DI, which is deionization, combined with remineralization with magnesium. Most filters just remineralize with calcium. And this water ran it over lodestones and vortexed the water. I hooked it up in my parents' bathroom initially, and then moved it to my parents' garage. And this was when I was starting to finally make YouTube videos after just daily study for about 2 or 3 years straight. I feel like online people tend to come out with a supplement company or start making social media posts. after just being in it for a few months or a year, I waited quite some time before I started releasing content. And of course, I was totally out to lunch on almost everything I was talking about, but at least it was different information. It was unique. I wasn't just talking about Kangen and alkaline water and all the same BS that we hear regurgitated from people that are just looking to make money and scam people, essentially. So even though for years a lot of my information was raw vegan inspired and detoxing in the wrong ways, I came at it with a pure heart, and I was relentless in my research and self-experimentation to where I just kept growing very rapidly. So I kept up with drinking this water that went through a very specific stage order. So it wasn't just RO, but it was sediment and KDF in a very specific order to the RO, and then to the deionization membranes, and then to the remin. So it's not just having the right media in there, but it's having them in the right order that people forget about. And that water started to change my life. I was a really foggy child because I didn't like red meat. I was mostly eating white meat for the first 20 years of my life or so. And I probably had a chronic deficiency in everything, in zinc, copper, iron, magnesium. I was probably deficient in everything combined with excess heavy metals, which is most of the people in the world today, which I believe is why the world is messed up. So I started drinking filtered water, the right filtered water. I started taking the right supplements. I focused heavily on magnesium and shilajit, but I was also experimenting with other supplements. I was injecting myself with procaine hydrochloride in my RV, which is a really obscure Romanian anti-aging drug that has acetylcholine effects. And I was getting into tobacco, which mimics acetylcholine. And I was just really heavily brain focused because I was tired of the fog. And drinking pure water was a huge part of my unplugging from the matrix, so to speak, from clearing the fog and being able to see clearly this reality, increasing my creativity, seeing what I can offer the world. It just felt like I could finally see the light and I could see where I was going in my life once I added in clean drinking water. Not well water, not spring water, clean filtered water. And over the years, I've made a point that the quality of your blood is determined by the quality of your drinking water, because what you drink becomes your blood. And connecting that to this idea of saving money for an affordable water filter. For example, a lot of people are looking in the price point of $300 to $500 for a water filter, which really devalues them as a human being. They're telling me that they're only worth $300 to $500. That's what I get out of that message. That might sound elitist to some, and I would say it sounds elitist to people with a foggy brain, because when I first invested in my water filter, it was around $1,200 or $1,300, and I put it on credit, and I had no idea how long it would take to pay it back. At that point, I was making minimum wage and working several jobs and going to college, and I didn't care about the payments because I knew it was the most important thing I could do for my health is to start drinking this water. And at a deep level, I understood that those payments would be peanuts in the future with having a clear mind and figuring out how to be more of service to the world and create value for the world and get money in return for that. I knew that it would pay for itself. I really feel like the financial mindset is such an important part of health. Realizing that your creativity, your ability to generate new business ideas is completely 100% predicated upon your physical health, and specifically your brain health. And let me tell you, I was a C and a D student, and I went to the moon with my brain function after proper strategic supplementation, again, specifically magnesium and shilajit consistently, and having this clean solvent, this clean drinking water that I could use as the base for my teas, my coffee, washing my fruits and vegetables, cooking my pasta in. I mean, all of the applications for clean drinking water, it's not just drinking. It's cooking. It's washing your fruits and vegetables. It's preventing disease in your cats and dogs because they need clean drinking water just like we do. It's water for watering your houseplants. In my case, there's a carnivorous plant, a Nepenthes pitcher plant, that exclusively gets the Mitolife EZ Flow structured water. Just in case you didn't know, houseplants or your garden plants don't like tap water unless you live rural like me and it's raw spring water. In that case, that's great for the soil. But in most people's cases with municipal water, you want to always filter it. Now, of course, there will always be the spring water people or the naturalist that believe that water is always destroyed when it goes through filtration medias. I've heard this from quantum health people on social media. One woman the other week, someone sent me a video where she was saying that water is impossible to structure after it's gone through reverse osmosis. This was verbatim from this woman, which is really laughable. It just shows her ignorance because I'm proving her wrong with this EZ Flow Mitolife filter. Before we go any further, I will say that if you are pinching pennies, if you're on the verge of bankruptcy, if you're at a time of severe struggle financially in your life, then I understand because I've been there, minus the bankruptcy part. And what I would encourage you to do, and what I've been telling people to do for years, no matter what water filter I was promoting at the time, was to find a filtered water store. You all know about the dispensers at the health food store, at your grocery stores, where you can bring a 5-gallon jug and fill up. But there are better things than the dispensers, and these tend to be the water filtration stores, which if you are in a population dense area, I'm sure there's a million of them in Austin, LA, Seattle, New York, whatever big city, you will be able to find a filtered water store that is way beyond, as far as quality goes, these water dispensers. But do the best that you can, because in the natural health world, there's a lot of perfectionists projecting, basically letting perfect be the enemy of good. Just do the best you can with what you have financially, but definitely filter your water and definitely don't waste your money on any filter that's under $1,000, any filter from Costco. Maybe a water delivery service is a route to go, but I personally wouldn't trust a lot of those. I would just say that the financial investment to have your own filtered water, let alone structured filtered water, on tap in your kitchen for all the uses that I described is priceless, and it will pay for itself in the increase of brain function that you get from it. Okay, time to get into water structuring, which is the point of this show, finally. I just wanted to give context and share my history, that I'm not new to this, that I've been studying it for a long time. I've tried a lot of different waters, and there's something very special about this new Mitolife filter. There's nothing like it on the market. You can only get this water from Mitolife. So a lot of brilliant scientists have built their work on top of Gilbert Ling's work. Gilbert Ling was a Chinese biochemist. He was a cell physiology expert. He wrote several books: In Search of the Physical Basis of Life in 1984, 1992. A Revolution in the Physiology of the Living Cell was published. In 2001, Life at the Cell and Below Cell Level was published. A full list of his books and publications and information could be found at gilbertling.org. He was a brilliant guy. He questioned the sodium-potassium pump hypothesis, arguing that there wasn't enough cellular energy to power that. And that's something to this day that is still taught in all colleges. He conducted experiments showing that cells, cell membranes, even without pumps, still maintain their ion gradients, basically just turning a lot of conventional ideas about physiology on their head. And brilliant men like Ray Peat and Gerald Pollack built upon his work. And specifically with structured water, Gerald Pollack, who I interviewed, a biomedical engineering professor from the University of Washington, he released a book in 2013, The Fourth Phase of Water, and he breaks it down in easier terms than Gilbert Ling. He made it really digestible, even though it's very scientifically heavy information. But in that book, there's a lot of pictures, so you can visualize it. And in his interviews, I believe in the interview that I had with him, he often makes the analogy about getting injured, getting a cut. The blood that comes out of us is not pure liquid. It doesn't run like water from our tap. It's thicker. It's more like a gel, not like Jell-O, but somewhere in between liquid water and Jell-O. And that's because the water in our body is structured. Definitely go back and listen to that show that I had with Gerald Pollack, because he really explains it in simple terms. But the basic idea is water, or H2O, is a dipole. So it has a positive charge on one side and a negative charge on the other. The negative end is with the one oxygen atom, and the positive end is on the hydrogen sides. And the H2O water molecule has a bent shape to it with an angle of approximately 104.5 degrees between the two hydrogen atoms. And that remains unchanged with structured water. So what is structured water? Well, we know that there's ice, there's liquid water, and there's gas or vapor water that we can see in the sky as clouds. But structured water is also called exclusion zone water, crystalline water, hexagonal water, coherent water, or fourth phase water, which is not an ice, a liquid, or a gas. And the other analogy that I love from Gerald Pollack is he describes water molecules in, say, a glass of water. They're all bouncing around at insanely fast speeds randomly. So the H2O molecules are all bouncing around randomly. Whereas in structured water, they're almost like soldiers lined up in an organized way, hence structured. And it could be called H3O2 instead of H2O. This is the same water that our cells make. And the difference with this H3O2 is that it's able to work with proteins and enzymes. And ATP, that's always called the energy currency of the cell or energy currency of the body, cannot work without structured water. It's actually the structured water that is doing the work, not adenosine triphosphate. When ATP is broken down via hydrolysis, that process, hydro, involves water, and the energy stored in those phosphate bonds are released when they react with a water molecule. And not just H2O, it requires H3O2. Now, where it gets really interesting is this exclusion zone aspect. So Gerald Pollack showed that where water is adjacent to hydrophilic surfaces, hydrophilic means water loving, hydrophobic means water repelling. So our cell membranes, our blood vessels, the cytoplasm in our cells, these are all water loving surfaces. And when water interacts with them, it forms this exclusion zone water. Exclusion meaning it acts as a physical barrier to solutes or substances that are in the water because this exclusion zone water is negatively charged. And certain things form exclusion zone water or structured water in the body. Gerald Pollack talks about this in his book. Sunlight or infrared light forms this negatively charged exclusion zone water. Grounding, if the water is vortexed, a magnetic influence can form exclusion zone water. And even ultrasound, which is really fascinating because I've experimented over the years with a little ultrasonic brain device. And I think now that's how it works, is it's actually structuring the water in my brain. And that's why that ultrasonic neurophone that I have on my Matt Blackburn site feels so good. And there's also the influence of crystals, even simple quartz or hematite or lodestones, or in the case of the Mitolife filter, which you can't find with any other company, elite type 1 shungite from Russia. Very unique stone. People have been putting that in their water for hundreds of years, even bathing in it, bathtubs made out of shungite. And I guess now is a good time to get into the EZ Flow Mitolife filter and why I'm so excited about it. So a lot of the water structuring devices on the market are an addition after your unit. So on my off-grid house here, down in my utility room, I have a crazy setup with multiple vortexes and running it through different gemstones. And I think those two things are the most important when it comes to other devices out there that say that they make the water coherent or structured in different ways. I would just be a little more careful with investing in those. But as far as vortexing and spinning the water and running it over crystals, I think you cannot go wrong with those two things. Those are definitely the highest priority. For example, for years, I used the Duet Water Revitalizer. I don't know if they still sell those at Bed Bath & Beyond, but they're $300 to $500. You can often find them used, but you have to always replace this little mineral cartridge at the bottom that gets really grimy over time. And it's just basically a big magnetic stir, essentially. And it's really loud, by the way. And I used it for years. I believe it holds about a half gallon, and I would just put it at its max 27-minute setting and just run it all day long. But it was just one more thing to do. And I think, especially in the health community, people are looking to simplify. And if you have a water routine where you have to put it through all these different devices manually, and it's this whole process, yeah, it's great to have intention and to put energy into your drinking water, but to do that day in and day out for months or years, it just becomes a big chore. Enter the Mitolife EZ Flow structured water filter, where it's all integrated. So now I'm going to go through the process. What is it finally? So it goes under your kitchen sink again. You hook it up to the water line, you tee it off with the same fitting with the old Mitolife filter. You can use the same connections for the most part. The only one that will be different is the storage tank. And I'll circle back to why I changed in a little bit here. So the first stage is 5 micron filtration. The second stage is KDF. And then it goes through the heavy hitter, which is a reverse osmosis, 100 gallons per day membrane. And that's what does most of the heavy lifting. And a lot of people just look for reverse osmosis by itself. But like I said earlier, it's really about the steps. And after the RO, then it goes through a carboxylic resin cartridge. If you've had the old Mitolife filter, it's essentially the same thing. It's a cation filter. And after going through those stages, it reduces the contaminants almost 100%. With water filters, you can't make 100% claims. So I could just say 99.99% reduction for chlorine, chloramines, fluoride, heavy metals like arsenic, bacteria, viruses, nitrates, sulfates. Whether you're on municipal water or you're on a well, I still use this filter and I'm on a spring. I think no matter the water source, this is a great filter to use. So now for the exciting part. So now the water is treated, it's primed, and now it goes through the water structuring process. The next stage is really cool. So it's type 1 elite unpolished shungite. If you're not familiar with shungite, it is a fun rabbit hole. There's actually a great book on it. It's called Shungite Protection, Healing, and Detoxification by Regina Martino. Recommend reading that book if you're interested in learning more about it. It's 95% plus carbon, from 95 to 99%. It's mostly carbon, but it's also similar to shilajit. It contains pretty much the whole periodic table, and it's a source of this longevity substance that people supplement by itself called C60 or carbon 60, also called Buckminster fullerene, because it's shaped like the buckyball, this structure that Buckminster Fuller identified. Think of a geodesic dome, but mirrored, so a full circle. It's essentially what it is. And think of activated charcoal. A lot of people keep that in their medicine cabinet. I recommend that if you have food poisoning. C60 is kind of like activated charcoal on steroids. So for hundreds of years, perhaps thousands of years, people have put shungite rocks in their drinking water to purify it. And there may or may not be a remineralization aspect. Now, I'm talking about trace, tiny, tiny amounts, but it still does contain elements, even though it's mostly carbon. I am working on getting a full water test on the website, so stay tuned for that. But I'm really excited to show you guys what this filter produces. So after the carboxylic resin, it goes up to the shungite filter. There's almost a gram of shungite in there. That was a really expensive cartridge for me to make. Hence the price increase from the older filter. But I really think it's worth it. You look at all the other filters on the market, you can find ones with lodestones, with polished rose quartz. By the way, polished rocks aren't going to have the same effect as unpolished in a water unit. You can find polished quartz and different gemstones and other water filters. There's none that I'm aware of that use shungite. The mouthfeel of this water is unlike anything I've ever experienced. Then the water goes through a 850 nanometer infrared light, which that is the only, you can call it downside to this filter, is you have to have an outlet under your kitchen sink, or you could just use a battery that you keep swapping out, because the electricity usage is only 3, maybe 5 watts. It's just a tiny infrared light, so it doesn't draw much power at all. But if you have a garbage disposal under your kitchen sink, that's great. You just plug it in and it keeps this little infrared light on. And what's unique is that stage with infrared light, the water is not just going through the light, but there's a hydrophilic surface around it, which is the combination to structure the water. After that, it goes through at the end this structured water cell right before it goes up to the faucet. And it will pass through 100 up to 200 vortexes, which is just unbelievable, because normally you just vortex the water once in one vortex, but this is 100 to 200 vortexes, which is really cool. And in between uses, there's actually this buildup of charge in the water in that infrared stage. So that's really cool. So in between uses, you get this supercharged water coming out of your faucet that's just been bathing in that 850 nanometer light. I forgot to mention, after it goes through the shungite, it goes through catalytic carbon and then the infrared light. So this is a 10-stage water filter, with several of the stages being the structuring part. But the majority of them being actual mechanical filtration. So just to recap or reiterate what structured water is, it's essentially a battery. Because with a battery, you have a positive side and a negative side, and batteries store energy. As we know with our phones or cars, that energy could be tapped to power the device or automobile, or in this case, a human being or any animal, really. It's the influence of the things that I mentioned before, whether it's sunlight, infrared light, magnetism, vortexing, ultrasound, whatever it is, it's creating this charge separation, and that creates health, whether it's in a human being or in any animal on Earth. And I've heard it said before in the health community that you can't consume structured water, or the closest thing would be Jello or the juice from fruits and vegetables that hasn't been pasteurized and stored for a long time. And I think that is true. That is the huge benefit that you get from green juices, although I'm not a big fan of that, or fruit juices, which I prefer to vegetable juices, besides the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes. And forget the biosludge that it was grown in and the salt-based NPK fertilizer and that whole side of it. Just the good side of it. Yes, you're getting vitamins, minerals, enzymes, but you're also consuming structured water, essentially. And the concept behind this EZ Flow Mitolife filter is that your body doesn't have to work to structure the water that you're drinking when it's coming in already structured. That's the basic idea. Because you could do it yourself with sun exposure right now. And for the next several months up here in North Idaho, I'm not going to see sun exposure much, let alone infrared light. But that's why I have my wood burning barrel sauna that I use all winter long, and I really feel a huge boost from it. I believe the primary benefit is that it's structuring the water in my cells. One at-home experiment that I did is with the BioWell GDV camera. It stands for gas discharge visualization. I think I started using this camera around 2016 or so. It's essentially a camera where you put your finger in it, each fingertip. It zaps it with a little bit of electricity that you don't feel, and your fingertips release a little bit of extreme low frequency ultraviolet light, which this really sensitive camera picks up on, and it maps it to traditional Chinese medicine meridian points through the software, shows your biofield, and you could essentially use it as a diagnostic tool to see the condition of your different organs and glands. But they have a water sensor. I took my tap water, which tap water is underplaying what it is because it's still going through 4 or 5 water structuring devices before it comes out of every faucet in my house. But it's still relatively tap water. It's not going through the EZ Flow Mitolife structured water filter. So I took tap water and then the EZ Flow water in shot glasses, and the EZ Flow water was more variable. So it was more dynamic in the spikes of its energetics, as shown by the BioWell water electrode. So that was really interesting to see. I posted that on my stories on Instagram and Facebook. It would be more interesting to do that with tap water in San Diego or Los Angeles compared to the Mitolife EZ Flow water. I can imagine it would be a huge difference. And less esoteric measurements that could be used to prove that this EZ Flow water is different is by measuring the surface tension. So structured water has lower surface tension than regular water. And you could use the what's called Dunoy ring method with the tensiometer to figure that out. You could also look at the density and the viscosity of the water. It will be denser and more viscous. So there's scientific methods to calculate that. The pH is also naturally higher just with the water being structured. It's not a giant difference, but there will be a small increase in the potential of hydrogen, the pH. So for those with the previous Mitolife filter, just a little explanation there. Some relationships work out better just being friends versus business partnerships. And that was the case with this filter. I do believe that the EZ Flow is a better design. The water definitely tastes better and is more gelatinous. It's hard to describe. It just feels more dense than the old 7-stage water filter that I was selling. The old one is still a decent unit, but it doesn't structure the water. So for those that want to upgrade from the old system, you can email our support team and we will give you a deal to switch out your old filter for the new one. And for those that do not want to upgrade, you can still buy replacement cartridges and continue using the old 7-stage filter by going to flowmotionwater.com. And that's where you can keep up with maintenance and support through contacting them. If you do order the new EZ Flow water filter, we will send you the manual to install it and the filter maintenance schedule, how often to change out all of the different filters, which varies depending on the source water. But in general, the first stage is going to be 1 to 2 years. The second stage, KDF, will be 2 to 4 years. All of the structuring cartridges, the magnetic chamber, 10 plus years at least. The infrared light chamber, same thing. The RO is 3 to 5 years. The carboxylic resin filter, 6 months if the water's really bad, but generally only once a year for that one. And all of those replacement cartridges will be available on my website, which is mitolife.co. So I hope that you do upgrade. If you've had my old filter, this one is way better. I think people are generally going to like it a whole lot more than the old one. And it's available now. So if you go to mitolife.co, click on the water tab, and it is the EZ Flow structured water filter. I also sell a bunch of different supplements under the wellness tab. These are the things that I think everyone should prioritize. I've been joking on social media recently about the creatine craze, and I think that supplement can be helpful if it's a good lab-tested source. But in general, that is way down the priority list. I would put it in the 30s to 40s of supplements to take, whereas all the ones on the Mitolife site would be the most important supplements to take first. My previous show from last Friday was on high-dose melatonin. That was a really fun show to record, packed with a bunch of unique information that you've probably never heard about the power of supplementing melatonin. You can check out my recommended products at matt-blackburn.com from other brands, as well as my CLF protocol. I announced on social media, but for listeners that don't follow me there, I'll announce it here. I'm switching the show to mostly a solo format. I think that's what most people are doing. I just haven't had much luck lately finding interesting guests, and it's hard to nail them down. And it seems like people really love my solo shows. That's the feedback that I get. They're most interested to hear what I have to say on different topics. So that is my goal, to do a bunch of solo shows from now on various topics and keep them somewhat on the short side so they're not several hours, and make them fun, interesting, and informative. So that is all for today. See me on Instagram, Matt Blackburn, Mitolife on Instagram as well. That's where a lot of information is shared if you want to keep up to date on my latest research. And I will see you guys next Friday. Stay supercharged.